Welcome everyone to this revision video on the character of Slim in John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. Now, I'm making this video deliberately to help you with the second essay, the context essay, on the Unit 1 Section A WJEC English Literature paper. I'm really hoping this is useful for your revision. You won't be able to remember absolutely everything in this video, but I will go through all of the key quotations you could ever possibly need, and I'm going to link that to all of the important contextual points you might like to make. So I'm hoping this is a useful revision tool. Before we start looking at the character of Slim, I want you to consider how different he is presented to compared to Curly. And I think John Steinbeck deliberately creates these two characters as opposites. So I'm going to use this phrase: Slim is the antithesis of Curly. And I think this is deliberate. While Curly is described as wearing high-heeled boots to suggest that he's better than the other men, to show how he's not a labouring man, and to show how he deserves more respect than the others, we get quotations like, Slim don't need to wear no high-heeled boots on a grain team, to show how Slim doesn't demand respect like Curly does. Slim earns respect from the men by being a hard worker. And I think all the way through I could pick out tons of quotations. But if you constantly think that Slim is different to Curly, then I think that's a really fruitful conversation to have as we go through this discussion. Now, I also want to, before we start the proper analysis of the quotations, is to remind you that 1930s America was not a meritocracy. Now, I'm using the word meritocracy deliberately because a meritocracy means a society where if you are hardworking and talented, then you are going to succeed. And I think 1930s America was not a meritocracy because some people were just unlucky. They were unlucky that they lived through a time of Great Depression. They were unlucky that in 1929 the Wall Street crash happened, which meant that millions of people lost their savings. They were unlucky to lose their jobs. They were unlucky that they didn't have a successful future in their lives. And when I look at Slim, I think Slim is the type of person that should be succeeding in life. Slim is kind, and he respects others, and he acts with wisdom. He's hardworking, he's a talented worker, he's a natural-born leader. And yet it's Curly who gets success, simply because of luck. Curly doesn't deserve success. He's aggressive and hot-headed. He's violent. He's a bully. So I think Steinbeck is showing us through both of these characters that during the Great Depression, people didn't get the success that they deserved. Some people were lucky, some people were not. Now, I also think it's really tragic, before we start taking a look at Slim, in that he never tells us what his dream is. We see that Crooks has a dream. He dreams of equality and being treated like a human being, not confined and segregated to the harness room. Candy longs for a world where maybe he isn't seen as disposable anymore. George dreams of a time when he can escape the Great Depression. Lenny dreams of a place where he can be safe and he can fulfill his fantasies without people hurting them. And we see Curly's wife, who has a dream of escaping the Great Depression through Hollywood. And yet Slim doesn't have a dream. My personal view on this is I think Slim has simply given up on his dream. He's accepted that the 1930s is a time where he is not going to succeed. And as a result, he's accepted his role on this ranch. He might be respected by all of the workers. He might be the highest in terms of the hierarchy of this ranch, but he isn't as high as Curly and the boss, two characters we don't particularly like. I think he's accepted his position, even though if he was born in a different time, he would be the most successful person on this ranch. And finally, Slim is a kind character, but he is also realistic. His kindness isn't so great that he's easily exploited. He's realistic that this is a difficult and painful time to live. And he also realizes that he has a responsibility And we see that in the way that he allows Candy's dog to die. So when we think of Slim, I want you to think about how Curly is often seen as his counterbalance. Now, instead of going through absolutely every quotation that we possibly could about Slim, I'm going to create this video into specific sections to help you with an essay. So if this was an essay plan for the essay in your exam, this is how I would probably structure it. I'd begin with an introduction on Slim. Some of the things we've just talked about might very well make their way into that introduction. Now, if I was going to write the first main section of my essay, I would probably make lots of points about how Slim is respected and skilled and he deserves success. So when we go through this video, that's the first thing I'm going to focus on. I'm going to focus on how well respected he seems to be. Now, a logical movement from that into my second main section is going to be how Slim makes difficult decisions, but he always seems to do them for the right reasons. Now, as I get to the end of my essay, I'm then going to show how Slim offers kindness in a very cruel world. Now, I believe I can make some really insightful links to context in all three of those main sections. And by the time I've shown that he's very well respected, deserves success but doesn't get it, how he makes difficult decisions for the right reasons because he understands how hard the world can be, and the kindness that he offers, I think then I'm ready for a conclusion to finish off my essay. So that's how this video is going to be split up. So our first section is that Slim is respected by nearly all of the men on this ranch. And the quotation I've selected is the first time we hear anything about Slim. Candy says, "He's a hell of a nice fella. Slim don't need to wear no high-heeled boots on a grain team." Now, from this quotation, you can see that Slim's respect is greater because there are other people on the ranch who do something different. Now, the reference to high-heeled boots there is a reference to Curly. Curly demands respect. Slim seems to earn respect, and that's going to be a central thread of our essay that we write. Now, the fact that he works on a grain team shows that whilst he is the leader on this ranch, he still gets his hands dirty. He still works hard. He's still industrious. He's not too good just to exploit other people and let them do the work instead. And it's something that we also see in the character of Crooks. The first thing Crooks says about Slim is, "Slim's as good a skinner as I ever seen." And when we see Slim interact with Crooks for the first time, Crooks says that the tar is ready for Slim to use. And he asks Slim, "Do you want me to do it?" Slim says, "No, I'll do it myself." And that's one of the biggest ways that I think Curly and Slim are presented. Slim is not so high up that he won't help other people below him. Curly is the opposite. Curly exploits those below him, even though he could offer some kind of assistance. The first actual description we get of Slim is a tall man stood in the doorway. Now here, the pre-modifying adjective tall, we could probably link to the idea of respect. Because he is tall, people look up to him. Very different to the first adjective that's used about Candy, an old man. Here, this is a positive adjective to show that Slim is a very well respected person who everyone seems to be able to admire. So a tall man stood in the doorway, and then we get this description. Like the others, he wore blue jeans and a short denim jacket. Now, I think the fact that he chooses to dress like all of the other people on this ranch suggests that he sees other human beings as equals, as fellow compatriots. He doesn't see them as workers to be exploited. He works alongside them and doesn't just tell them what to do. Now here you've got the blue jeans part, which shows that he's a labouring man. The fact that he's wearing denim is this very similar to how George and Lenny are described when we first see them. But the key phrase there is like the others, because Slim doesn't want to differentiate himself from the other people on this ranch. He sees them as fellow humans. And when we first hear the way he moves, it's described like this. He moved with a majesty only achieved by royalty and master craftsmen. And that's one of the most positive descriptions we get in the entire novella. And you've probably picked up straight away that there is a lexical set of royal or regal language being used. If he moves with a majesty, you've also got the alliteration of moves with a majesty, and I think that alliteration itself, along with master, shows admiration, almost a sense of wonder. He moved with a majesty only achieved by royalty and master craftsmen. It's almost like these men are completely in awe of him. And I think the alliteration highlights that there. But the word majesty shows he's almost royal in the way he moves. The majesty shows that he's completely in control of every action. He's very careful, he's very deliberate, and there's also a suggestion that he's really graceful. This is a labouring man who seems to operate with the type of gracefulness that a king or a queen or a prince would. So he moved with a majesty only achieved by royalty and master craftsman. Now the pre-modifying adjective here, master for craftsman, suggests that this is a very talented worker. Master craftsman suggests that he is incredibly skilled at his job. Now, we can juxtapose that with Curly. Curly is never described as skillful in his work. He's only ever described as skillful in the boxing ring. Now, they both have particular attributes. Slim uses his talents to work hard. Curly uses his talents to hurt others. And I think that's really important when we consider the context of the 1930s. In the 1930s, people were desperate to believe in the American dream, that hard work means you will be able to succeed. Now, in the 1930s, it was also a very hostile time. It became quite a Darwinian society where only the strong would succeed. I think Curly therefore symbolizes the way to succeed is through hostility, to bully others so that you can win the competition. And Slim shows us the other side, which is the way to achieve respect is through hard work, determination, and grit. Now we also get this description. He was a jerk-line skinner. That's his role on the ranch. But they describe him as the prince of the ranch. Now, he isn't literally a prince, but you can see that the word prince there shows the admiration of all of the people on this ranch. And where it says capable, that word capable there again signifies his level of skill. And this is what he is able to do. He's capable of driving 10, 16, even 20 mules. And the constant use of numbers there again shows that sense of admiration and respect. Almost like he is so talented, he could look after any number of animals, and then it's signified with a single line to the leaders, how effortless his talents seem to be. So from the first moments we see him, there is nothing but respect for this man. As his first introduction continues, we then hear that there was a gravity in his manner and a quiet so profound that all talk stopped when he spoke. And that gives us this sense of power that Slim seems to have. Such a power that others don't want to talk over him. Such a power that all he needs to do is to begin speaking and people are there to listen. Now, I think this makes him sound like a leader. Now, when Curly enters, the first thing he says is demanding, using imperative verbs constantly. Seen my old man? For Slim, he doesn't need to demand respect. The men respect him. And the word gravity there, if you think about what gravity is, gravity happens when something of such great mass causes other things to be attracted to it. That's why the Earth, with such a huge mass, has a gravity that holds things close to it. People gravitate towards Slim because they can see he's a natural leader, but more than that, he's a character of substance. This is a character who is worth listening to. And this is compounded when it says, his authority was so great that his word was taken on any subject, be it politics or love. Now, when Steinbeck first introduces him, he very much shows that this is a character who is deserving of respect, but not just in what he's skilled at. This is someone who you listen to about politics or love. Now, that pretty much encapsulates huge ideas in the world. Politics is an absolutely massive field, having political views. And again, love is an enormous field to have authority over. What Slim seems to be able to do is to understand what's really happening in the world, and he's not blinded by other people or other ideas. Slim seems to be incredibly confident, and people gravitate towards that confidence. Now, he very much sets him up as somebody who has all of the answers. Now, when we see Slim, I think he probably says that, Steinbeck says that Slim is the type of character we should see as a role model. And we should see it as quite a tragedy that Slim hasn't received the level of success in life that he deserves. And it's because of the context. It's because he's living during the Great Depression, a time when it was incredibly difficult to succeed. Now, his physical description is his hatchet face was ageless. His hatchet face suggests it's very angular. If his face is very angular, it suggests that he's very distinguished. He's very masculine. And it says he might have been 35 or 50, which shows that this character is almost an immortal figure. I'm not saying literally immortal, but he's almost the type of character that lives outside of time. You see Slim all the way through human history. People like Slim have always existed. Confident and quiet and incredibly serious. These are people that we're supposed to listen to. These are people we see as role models. These are people who have wisdom beyond words. Now, again, it's really sad that if he is 50 years old and he's still working incredibly hard on this ranch with no money at all, it should be a tragedy that this is someone who hasn't been able to succeed fully in life. But he still has the youth of a 35-year-old. It also tells us that his ear heard more than was said to him, and his slow speech had overtones not of thought, but of understanding beyond thought. Now, this creates almost like a godlike figure, somebody who understands more than just what they see, more than just what they hear. So if his ear heard more than was said to him, it seems to be he's able to see through people. He's able to pierce the words they're actually saying, and he seems to be able to understand the reasons why they're being said. And this is something we see when he talks to George. When George starts talking and Slim sees through what's really being said and understands what's happening behind those words. So this is a very astute character, someone who can see right the way down into the root of problems rather than being just blinded by words. Now, where it says his slow speech, this is the type of character who chooses his words very, very carefully. And we see that in the scene with Candy's dog. He's deliberately choosing exactly the right words. And it's not because he's thinking it through. It's almost like he's already thought. He's already understood what needs to happen. So this is a character I would describe as very pensive. Pensive means to be very, very full of thought, to understand beyond what's said. Almost like a godlike character. Now, lots of people describe Slim as the moral conscience of this story because he seems to understand what this is really about. Just like we can see that Of Mice and Men isn't really a story of some people who live on a ranch. Rather, it comments on what's really happening in 1930s America, where observing this microcosm, and we're not supposed to see these characters as real people, we're supposed to see what they really stand for. And it's like Slim can see beyond what's actually said to him. His physical description continues, and it moves on this time to his hands. And I think it's important that his hands are described because that's where his physical labor comes from. His hands are described as large and lean. So he's a very masculine and powerful character. But then we get they were as delicate in their actions as those of a temple dancer. Now, the word delicate there seems to juxtapose with the large, strong, powerful hands that he has. But actually, those two things seem to go in tandem. I would suggest that Slim knows he has a lot of power, but he is also very, very careful with what he does with that power. When we see Curly has lots of power, but he abuses that power. We see the boss who has a lot of power, and he doesn't necessarily use it for good intentions. But for Slim, he's aware of his power, but he's also aware of the consequences of having such power. So when it says we're as delicate in their action as those of a temple dancer, it is a simile that's being used, but he's being described here as a dancer. Dancers are elegant. Dancers also are graceful. Dancers have a huge amount of skill after years and years of honing that skill. And I think the way that he's described as a temple dancer almost suggests there's almost like a religious quality to Slim. He almost seems to be as delicate and graceful as this kind of angel figure that's able to always give the right answer, that's always able to act in the way that you're supposed to act. So it creates this character as very powerful, but also very delicate with that power, which is exactly what you need in the 1930s. We can then move on to when we see him talking to George, because George looked over at Slim and saw the calm, godlike eyes fastened on him. Now, the word calm there shows that he's not threatening. He knows he's a powerful character, but he's not threatened by him. And godlike, I think, is an essential word because it creates him as this religious, omniscient type of character who seems to see straight through him. And where it says eyes fastened on him, Slim is giving all of his attention to what George is saying without intimidating. So he's able to balance all of that power, but also show friendship. So I think he's quite an enigmatic character. Now, if we move on to the second main section, Slim always seems to be able to make life and death decisions, and he seems to be able to do that for the right reasons. First time we see Slim making a life or death decision is in his first description. Steinbeck tells us that Slim was capable of killing a fly on the wheeler's butt with a bullwhip without touching the mule. Now he gives us this image of Slim when he's working, and he will be able to notice threats to his animals. The mule in this case is the important animal that Slim, as part of his role as the jerkline skinner, must protect. Now, if there is a fly on one of the mules that he's driving, he identifies that fly as a threat and then takes very decisive, very deliberate action. He's able, seemingly, to assess which of these lives means more. And he's able to kill the fly, which poses a threat. That fly could bite the mule, lead to infection, and lead to his mule dying. He's able to make the decision that the fly must die in order to protect his mule, and then is able to do it incredibly gracefully, incredibly elegantly and skillfully, without causing any damage to the mule. So yes, he has killed the fly, but he's done it to save the more useful animal he sees in front of him. And we could suggest that there is a link here to the 1930s. In the 1930s, there was a huge surplus of available workers. And that meant that only the strong would be able to get jobs and the weaker wouldn't. If you were a vulnerable person, then you were less likely to get a job because there were so many strong men out there who were willing to work for very little money. Now here, it almost makes this fly sound disposable, much in the way that many people during the 1930s were treated as disposable. And we see that clearly in the character of Candy, don't we? He then moves on to this imagery. He tells us that his dog has had 9 puppies. And he tells us, I drowned 4 of them right off. She couldn't feed that many. And again, whilst it's a horrible thing to think about, we have to conclude that Slim probably made the right decision. Had he let all 9 of these puppies live, if the mother can't feed all of them, all 9 of them might die, and the mother might die too. So he's got a decision. Do I take action and make sure I keep some of these animals alive? Or do I gamble and maybe all of them die? Now, Slim thinks about what is best for the collective, and he thinks actually 4 of these puppies surviving is better than all of them dying. And therefore, he takes swift and decisive action. I think it's important that Steinbeck tells us that he does this right off, because there's almost no hesitation in Slim's mind. He knows he's made the right decision, and he has the conviction and the pragmatism to actually do it. But think about the tenderness in his voice when he says, she couldn't feed that many. That protection over the dog, the mother as well. We see this again in the character of Candy and his unfortunate loss of his dog. The Skinner had been studying the old dog with his calm eyes. Now take a look at the word studying there. Studying suggests that Slim has been assessing the situation. He's not been assessing Candy, he's been assessing the real debate that's happening here. So Carlson wants to kill Candy's dog purely for selfish reasons. Slim looks beyond that and actually considers, is this the right thing for the dog? And Steinbeck deliberately uses the adjective old dog there to highlight that, okay, this is a conversation about euthanasia, really, about whether it would be better to put this dog out of its misery or to allow the dog to continue suffering. And he does so with his calm eyes. It's not the first time we've seen the word calm. Calm suggests that Slim is completely in control of what he's about to say, completely in control about his thought process, about his analysis skills. And in the end, he says, yeah, he said, you can have a pup if you want to. Now, there, he has affirmed that it is the right thing to let that dog die. But he does so with kindness for Candy. So he has said that, yes, we should let Candy's dog die, but he does so in a way that he's thinking that Candy needs something positive in his life as well. So he seeks to replace the old dog with a younger puppy. And then it says that he seemed to shake himself free for speech. That was not an easy decision for Slim to make. And yet he is confident that that decision is correct. And it continues when he tells that Carl's right, Candy. That dog ain't no good to himself. Now, in this case, we can see that Slim is thinking about the dog and he places the needs of the dog above Candy's need for companionship. And then he shows that he's not a hypocrite. He tells us, I wished somebody'd shoot me if I got old and a cripple, which shows that Slim acts with empathy. He puts himself in the dog's position and then makes a decision he wished someone would make for him. Now, again, we can link this to the idea that during the 1930s, lots of people became disposable. This dog, after hard work for its entire life, it used to be a sheepdog. After a whole lifetime of hard work, it is now seen as useless. Much like Candy, after a whole life of working hard, is also seen as disposable. So it might be worth linking to the context there. And when Slim makes the decision, he knows it's the right one. And Steinbeck tells us that Candy looked a long time at Slim to try and find some reversal. Because Slim is the only person that can save his dog. Slim is the only person that can let Candy keep his dog. But really importantly, Steinbeck tells us in very monosyllabic language, and Slim gave him none. Because Slim confirms that this decision is the right decision. Before Carlson leaves, Slim says, take a shovel. Because Slim is thinking about Candy's feelings here too. Take a shovel is referencing that Carlson needs to bury this dog so that Candy, when he leaves the bunkhouse, doesn't come across the carcass of his best friend. Slim is thinking about what is right for Candy too. Carlson would have left the dog decomposing right outside the door. So Slim is thinking about what's right for Candy, but Candy's needs don't supersede the needs of the dog. And then again, he tells us, Candy, you can have any one of them pups you want. So he makes the very difficult decision, but he's also mindful that it isn't the decision that Candy wants. So he tries to offer Candy something positive to look forward to in life as well. The final quotation for this part of the essay, I'd suggest is, but Curly's going to want to shoot him. And suppose they lock him up and strap him down and put him in a cage. That ain't no good, George. I think Slim can see the options ahead of Lenny. He understands that there are certain paths that will be taken from now on. Now, Curly has been constantly saying, I'm going to shoot him in the guts. Consider how painful that is going to be for Lenny. Curly doesn't just want to kill Lenny, he wants retribution, he wants revenge, and he wants to cause him pain. So on the one hand, Lenny may be executed for his crimes by Curly. And the other path ahead of Lenny is for him to be locked up, strapped down, and put in a cage. Now, again, that imagery is particularly distasteful. Think about how vulnerable Lenny is. Think about how weak mentally he is. Think about how childlike and juvenile he is. Lenny is not going to be able to put up with that level of pain. Now we've got strap him down. Think about the pain involved there. Put him in a cage, confining him, putting him somewhere where he's going to be scared. And at that stage, Slim says, that ain't no good, George. There's almost a part of Slim that understands that there is a third path. And that third path is for George to take action. Now, whether that's for George to help him escape or whether that's for George to do what he does, we don't know. But with Slim's level of wisdom, he's almost preempting the fact that George needs to find a different solution because people like Lenny shouldn't be treated in the way that's going to happen to him. The final section I'd like to go through with you is that Slim knows how cruel the world is and he seems to offer kindness. Now, I like to consider that the character of Slim is almost like the antidote to the Great Depression. If people in the world were more like Slim, the world would be a better place. And I think that's one of the reasons why we see George and Lenny's relationship too, because that also is an antidote to the isolation and loneliness of the Great Depression. So Slim knows how cruel the world is in 1930s Great Depression America, and he seems to offer kindness. First thing he says to George is, "Hope you get on my team." It's an actual compliment. It's a positive thing to say. What Slim does is he offers an olive branch. He offers friendship. He doesn't instantly look for weakness. And if you think about nearly all of the other characters in this book, apart from George and Lenny, they all seem to be very good at identifying people's weaknesses. For Slim, he just wants to give a compliment. And when George compliments, Slim looked approvingly at George for having given the compliment. I think George and Slim are quite similar characters, and there's a part of me that thinks that George is going to end up like Slim. And I think there's an element of tragedy there too, because without Lenny, he also gives up on his dream and resorts to going into town, drinking his money away, and ending up with very little in the world. But Slim values the kindness that he sees in the world. When Curly is seen, he looks at people for weaknesses. For Slim, he looks at the positives in people's characters. And when he talks to Slim, his tone was friendly. It invited confidence without demanding it. And that's a really important line, because inviting confidence means you're ready to listen, but you're not telling people that they must speak. And I would juxtapose that with the character of Curly. The first thing Curly says is, "Seen my old man," which is an incredibly demanding sentence. And he also says to Lenny, "Speak when you're spoken to." Again, incredibly demanding, that people adhere to his authority. Slim never asks for confidence, but he is able to receive it because he doesn't demand it. And when George and Lenny, when George is talking about his relationship with Lenny, Slim is the only person that acts positively to the fact that they have a close relationship. The boss is suspicious. Curly is looking down and almost insulting them for it. But for Slim, he looks beyond the relationship and says, "Ain't many guys travel around together." And when it says he mused, it shows that he's really thinking about the reasons why people don't travel around together. Now remember, during the 1930s, there was a huge amount of competition between workers. So people didn't want to be friendly with each other. They were fighting each other for jobs constantly, out-competing each other, very often taking lower wages so that they could take the money and somebody else didn't. He says, "I don't know why. Maybe everybody in the whole damn world is scared of each other." And I think in that line, Slim shows us that the world would be a better place if we were able to forge those better relationships. And he asks George about it without asking at all. He says, "Funny how you and him string along together." It was Slim's calm invitation to confidence. Slim never tells George that he must talk to him. He just shows that he's interested, shows that he values him, and shows that he's willing to listen. After George tells Slim about some of the things that Lenny has done in his past, particularly grabbing the dress from the girl in weed, he, after assessing the situation, decides. "He's a nice fella," said Slim. "Guy don't need no sense to be a nice fella." And Slim is able to reinforce what the reader knows. Lenny does not hurt people on purpose. Now, whilst Slim is kind and respectful of other people, he's also not a weak character. He is able to stand up for himself too. And I think this line is a really complicated line that I think doesn't get the consideration it deserves. When Candy asks if anyone has any whiskey, he says, "I'd drink it myself if I had, and I ain't got a gut ache neither." And I think that tells us that whilst he is kind and respectful and looks out for others, he's also not there to simply give away everything that he has. So the fact that he would drink the whiskey himself shows that he doesn't really have those plans for the future either. He drinks like the rest of the men. He has to look after himself. So I think it's an interesting line to consider why Slim doesn't offer to give something to Candy. I think it shows that he understands that he does have to stand up for himself too. When Slim sees Curly attack Lenny, it says that Slim jumped up. And I think the verb jumped there shows that he's very quick to take action when he sees injustice. He knows that Lenny's not to blame for this fight, so he wants to stop it. When he sees injustice, he wants to fight against it. And he says, "The dirty little rat," he cried, "I'll get him myself." So Slim acts almost like this figure of justice. And when he sees that level of injustice, he's willing to take action. And yet, even though we have that derogatory insult, "dirty little rat," we know that Curly probably does deserve to be beaten up. He probably does deserve to have what's coming to him. When Curly is lying on the floor, the first thing Slim says is, "We got to get him to a doctor." So Slim is always compassionate. He always does what should be done. So even though Curly deserves what happens to him, Slim still acts in a responsible and kind way. And he tells us, this punk sure had it coming to him. But Jesus, he ain't hardly got no hand left. And again shows us that Curly doesn't really deserve compassion, but Slim gives it anyway. And that is continued in the final quote on this slide. Slim hurried out, and in a moment returned with a tin cup of water, and he held it to Curly's lips. So he offers support and he offers his kindness to anyone, regardless of who they are. And I think that's a real positive in the character of Slim. He helps fellow humans. And I think that's a massive message from Steinbeck, that we're supposed to look after each other more. And that's why we see George looking after Lenny, because everyone is fighting their own demons, and that all it takes is for humans to be a little bit more kind, and the world will be a better place for it. Now, if we move on to this longer quotation, this is when George asks for Slim's help because George doesn't want to be sacked. He doesn't want to be canned. And Slim comes up with a plan. And it says, Slim smiled wryly. His wry smile shows that he understands how to play this situation. He knows exactly what to say to manipulate and to make Curly do what he needs to do. So the fact that Slim knows exactly what to do means he's very good at assessing other characters and think about their motivations. So for Slim, he knows that Curly loves having a reputation as a fighter. Curly absolutely loves feeling that people respect him because of his strength. So he uses his weakness against him. And he says, "I think you got your hand caught in a machine. If you don't tell nobody what happened, we ain't going to. But just tell and try get this guy canned, and we'll tell everybody, and then will you get the laugh." Now, he's using Curly's weakness. He knows that Curly doesn't want to be laughed at. He knows that people, if he was seen as weak, then he wouldn't enjoy that. So he uses that against him. But it also shows that Slim is willing to stand up for those he sees as vulnerable. So he's actually manipulating Curly purely to protect George and Lenny. And I think that's important in the character of Slim. Now we're moving on to the final quotes that I'm going to share with you and explain with you. It says that Slim stood looking down at Curly's wife. He said, "Curly, maybe you better stay here with your wife." Now, Slim does this for a couple of different reasons. First of all, he doesn't want Curly to go and kill Lenny. because he understands that Lenny is not the type of character who understands what he's done. So he does it to protect Lenny. But he also does it because Curly's wife, for her whole life, seems to have been desperate for attention. And he makes the point that maybe Curly should stay in this place with his wife to be intimate and close with her now that she's died. Curly obviously denies that. And at the very end of the novella, Slim came directly to George and sat down beside him, sat very close to him. Now the other characters go and look at Lenny's dead body. Slim doesn't even think about Lenny's dead body. He goes directly to the person who is in pain, and that's George. Now the word directly there shows that Slim knows exactly what's happening. And when he sits down beside him, he creates that sense of equality. This is two men, two completely equal men sitting next to each other. And him sitting very close to him shows that he wants to support George. And he tells George, never you mind. A guy got to sometimes. And it's Slim who affirms to the reader that George did the right thing. Because what George did was put Lenny out of misery and pain, much like Candy's dog, the same decision that Slim made earlier. It also says that Slim twitched George's elbow. So he initiates actual physical contact with George, because that is him showing humanity, a human being seeming to look after another human being. And he says, come on, George, me and you'll go in and get a drink. And he offers some kind of sympathy. He wants to help George deal with these emotions. But the fact that he says, me and you'll go in and get a drink, also shows that that's now their only real way of escaping the hardship of the 1930s. Because George's dream of the little couple of acres has gone for good. Slim has one of the final lines. You had her, George. I swear you had her. Come with me. And he reaffirms the fact that sometimes you have to make a life and death decision, but as long as if you do it for the right reasons, then you can live with yourself. And I think it's really interesting that the final line isn't given to George or Lenny or Slim. It's given to a character that is much less compassionate, because both Curly and Carlson cannot understand why Slim is showing that level of kindness. And it said, now what the hell you suppose is eating them two guys? Because neither of them understand that Slim realizes that George needs support, and George needs company, and George needs kindness. The rest of the world seems to be hostile. And I've mentioned it before, but the 1930s was a time of Darwinian competitiveness. And I think it's only certain characters in this book that realize that competition just causes more hostility and makes the world a more difficult place. It's characters like Slim and characters like George that understand that you need to be kind and you need to offer support to other people. So I think that's really important in the grand scheme of the novella. Now, we've gone through nearly all of the quotes you could ever possibly need for Slim. In an exam situation, if Slim turns up as a single character, I feel like you've got a nice structure for an essay, and I feel like we've covered lots of contextual links that will serve you really, really well, and hopefully leave you with a big smile on your face when it comes to results day. Now, if Slim doesn't turn up as a character, he can be used in lots of other essays too. So if you think of some of the themes that Of Mice and Men share with us, I think Slim finds it into quite a few essays. Now, I'm hoping this has been useful. I'm hoping this will be a really useful revision tool for you. Like I said at the beginning of this video, you can't memorize absolutely every quote. So if you go through and you make detailed notes on the quotes that you feel like are most likely to turn up in an essay that you write, I would strongly recommend just focusing on those ones. I hope the exam goes really, really well for you. Massive, massive good luck, and I will see you in the next video that I make for you.